I'm Phil Andrews, local sportscaster and former high school, college, and professional football player. So it should be no secret to you that fall and football is my favorite time of the year. As a matter of fact, folks, football is what brings me here to Conshohocken. I'm standing here on the corner of 8th Ave and Fayette Street where 100 years ago, a team called the Iron Men played the first organized game of football in Conshohocken. 100 years is a long time ago. As a matter of fact, Dr. Hy Lee was serving the first of his 4 one-year terms as Burgess of the borough. Kerosene lamps, well, they were the main principal form of home lighting, and the horse and buggy was the means of transportation. Just across the street behind me, John Elwood Lee, the future tire magnate, was having his 3-story, 23-room mansion and huge carriage house built.
While Leland Mansion was being built in 1893, Conshohocken was also trying out a new form of transportation. Trolley cars ran the length of Fayette Street, seen here at 4th and Fayette, and along Hector Street. Conshohocken was a growing borough. In 1893, the town boasted 5,500 residents, 18 hotels, and 15 grocery stores. Steel making flourished at the Allenwood Iron and Steel Company. It was the men working in the mills who formed Conshohocken's first football team. The team was sponsored by the YMCA. The members called themselves the Iron Men. They played on what used to be the O'Brien property and is now the site of the Masons Lodge on the east side of Fayette Street between 8th and 9th Avenues. Although the Iron Men's first season wasn't very successful, the people of Conshohocken became true lovers of the sport. When the Iron Men faced Norristown on Conshohocken's home field, the Norristown boys were handicapped. Decisions changed according to the whims of the crowd, which, being Conshohocken, were against them. But Norristown took its revenge on Thanksgiving morning at Oakview Park in Norristown when they thumped the Iron Men 40-0.
You know, I've always wondered how Conshohocken got their rowdy reputation. I guess they were a pretty rough bunch a century ago. And from what I understand, well, some things never change. After winning a championship in 1895, just 2 years into the league, the game site shifted to this open field just off Fayette Street between 12th and 13th Avenues. Under a new sponsor called the Pioneer Club, well, the team continued to be successful for the next 10 years.
The Conshohocken Pioneers recorded a number of winning seasons, along with a couple of championships. The Pioneers attracted up to 5,000 fans at their games, and the popularity of football was growing. In 1906, a new team called the Reliance was formed across the river in West Conshohocken. It belonged to the Schuylkill Valley League, and it attracted players from the Pioneers. In its 9 years of existence, the Reliance squad won the Schuylkill Valley Championship 3 times, beating 3 of the top teams of the day, including Norristown, Pottstown, and Phoenixville.
In 1913, the Reliance slowed. By then, a number of their standout players had seen better days on the gridiron. In the fall of 1914, well, the sport moved back to Conshohocken under the tutelage of Bob Crawford. It was Crawford who had this field cleared at 11th and Harry Streets. It's now known as the A Field. Now, from 1914 through 1922, Bob Crawford led the Conshohocken Professional Athletic Club to an overall record of 55 wins, 4 losses, and 15 ties, beating some of the best teams in this part of the country during Conshohocken's golden era of football.
In 1914, Conshohocken was a town bustling with excitement. The town's population had swelled to nearly 8,000, and new houses were being built along the upper avenues. Fred J. Bloomhall was serving his 4th of 7 years as Burgess of the borough. There was much talk about building a new concrete bridge across the Schuylkill River to keep pace with all the new stores opening in Conshohocken's business district. One of the stores was Bob Crawford's Cigar Store on the corner of 2nd Avenue and Fayette Street.
If you were to see the size of Bob Crawford's store, you'd wonder how much activity could stem from that little store. But it was a gathering place, and evidently that was his office, where he would sign up these fellows from the various colleges and have them sign contracts to play football.
In 1914, Crawford assembled Conshohocken's first professional football team. Crawford knew talent and wasted no time recruiting locals from the borough and young college stars to play for the Orange and Black.
The pro team in Bob Crawford's time had a lot of college players, you know, and I think the town wanted to come and just see how good they were. This is long before pro football was around as we know it. And a lot of the folks in this town could never get to see a college game, but they could see the college players come here. We had a lot of good ones.
Crawford's team included the great 1-2 punch out of Penn State's backfield, Bill Barry and Frank King. Plus, one of the finest quarterbacks that Ursinus has ever produced, Billy Pannell. Conshohocken faced a tough schedule. Their first game was against the 1913 champions, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, who were the forerunners of the Philadelphia Eagles.
According to the Conshohocken Recorder, the Conshohocken Citizens Band, made up of 37 pieces, met the Frankfurt team at the borough's Reading Station. They led them all the way up Fayette Street to Firehouse Number 2, which served as the visitors' locker room. Shortly after 4 p.m., Burgess Bloomhall marched to the center of the playing field carrying the game ball, wrapped in orange and black ribbons, the home team colors. He unwrapped the ball and placed it on the playing field to start the contest. Less than 2 hours later, Conshohocken had beaten Frankfurt 18-0.
The locals posted a 10-0 record that year. They were not only undefeated, but also unscored upon, outscoring their opponents 289-0. In 1915, Conshohocken's schedule was a bit tougher, but the fans would never know it. Once again, the locals went undefeated, winning 11 games. One of the reasons for this success was the addition of the Ursinus College standout, Earl Pottinger. Pottinger later went on to play and coach with the New York Giants in the National Football League. Football fever was reaching an all-time high. 8,000 to 10,000 fans would attend home games, and thousands traveled to the away games.
If Conshohocken played away, which they did, this town on a Saturday afternoon would be a deserted village. They would hire a train, and approximately 3,000 people would follow Conshohocken to wherever the game was being played.
The Orange and Black opened the 1916 season with 5 straight victories, outscoring their opponents 210-0. Conshohocken had extended their 3-year record to 28-0 and remained unscored upon. But on November 4th, 1916, all that would change.
The Carlisle Indians, under the great coach Clavette, booked a game with Conshohocken as a little stopover on their way to Philadelphia. The game was expected to be the biggest ever played in the borough. According to Crawford, it would be a fast and clean game. Coach Clavette said he'd like to make the event an annual outing for the Indians. Well, neither would happen, as the Conchi team, along with over 6,000 fans, were in total shock as the Indians drove right down the field in the opening minutes of the second quarter and scored a touchdown. For the first time in the team's history, Conshohocken had been scored upon. Next, Conchi's end scampered around the right end to tie the score at 6-6. Then in the third quarter, Conshohocken came out on their first possession and drove down here to the 10-yard line. Quarterback Billy Pannell completing a pass to Pick Campbell, a former Reliant standout. Campbell was down just short of the goal line. And then another Indian defender came and hit Campbell feet first. Pannell and Riggs hustled down to help out their teammate. One push led to another, and before everyone's eyes, well, Coach Clavette pulled his Indians from the field and started to leave. And then the crowd became very angry because the Indians had already collected their $300 guarantee at halftime. As the crowd surged out onto the field, Conshohocken police officers drove Coach Clavette to the station on West Hector Street and put him in jail for what they claimed was, well, his own protection. The Indians had to be escorted to the train station to make a safe departure. Clavette would later say he was unjustly locked up and forced to give back half the money. He threatened a $10,000 lawsuit. The Indians never returned to Conshohocken. According to local newspapers, Conchi won that game 3-0, but it went down in the record books as a forfeit. The team's luck soon ran out, the following week losing its first ever game to Holmesburg. That stopping the club's win streak at 29 games.
The following year, in 1917, World War I broke out and depleted the ranks of all teams. Conchi didn't do so well, but there was one player of note, Jack Kelly. This great oarsman from East Falls and father of Princess Grace of Monaco was a fair running back for Conshohocken. Due to war, there was no football in Conshohocken in 1918. The borough took military service seriously. In fact, on a per capita basis, Conshohocken enlisted more men and women in World War I than any other community in America. The U.S. Congress honored the tiny borough's sacrifice by naming a merchant marine ship the Conshohocken. Football returned big time in 1919. That year, the team led by Pottinger, Mitchell, and Ryan powered their way to a perfect 9-0 record, outscoring their opponents 232-14. The championship season earned the team recognition by the National Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. Today, the team photo appears among other great teams of their time. Despite a disappointing 1920 season, in 1921, the Conchi lads recorded 8 victories, beating Holmesburg 7-3 and knocking off the then undefeated Yellow Jackets 14-7. Conchi remained undefeated until the final game of the season when the Philadelphia Quakers came to town on a rainy Thanksgiving Day and beat the locals 14-0. The teams were sopping wet, but the fans remained dry beneath the newly enclosed bleachers. Bob Crawford had managed his final year in 1922. He went out the way he came in, a winner, posting a 6-1 record, losing the final game of the season. When Billy Ponnell took over as manager in 1923, Conshohocken's golden era of football had passed. The National Football League was coming into the spotlight. Crawford declined to join the league because he felt that Conshohocken couldn't produce the crowds needed to support an NFL team. True, Conshohocken could not produce the crowds necessary to succeed in the NFL, but the borough's prosperity during the 20s led to a flood of new opportunities. Prosperity in the borough rested on the shoulders of manufacturers. The Allen Wood Steel Company employed nearly 5,000 locals and was producing more than 8% of the nation's steel. The Lee Tire and Rubber Company, Quaker Chemical Corporation, Hale Fire Pump, the Walker Brothers, and other manufacturers prospered along the river. Along with full employment came new housing, new stores, a new movie theater, a new bridge across the Schuylkill River, and an extraordinary number of new football teams.
By 1923, local big-time football was fading, but football fever in the high schools had begun to spread throughout the borough. As a matter of fact, it started right here at St. Matthew's High School.
At a morning recess in the early fall of 1910, a group of upperclassmen from St. Matthew's High gathered around the artesian well and formed a football club. They promptly challenged players from Old Conshohocken High to a pair of games and defeated them both times. The Conshohocken High players then joined the St. Matthew's Club. Together, they defeated teams like Magnolia from Philadelphia and the Red Hot Irish from Sweetland. The 1915 St. Matthew's Football Club played on the lower part of John Elwood Lee's golf course at 12th Avenue on Wood Street. The club continued to play into the 1920s before the schools sponsored football. St. Matthew's High School leaders recognized the need for sports programs, and in 1923, one football game was played. In 1924, there were 15 players. They played only 4 games, losing one to their arch rival, St. Patrick's of Norristown. Each successive year, the team's size and the number of games per season increased. St. Matthew's 1927 season was highlighted with a 7-0 Thanksgiving Day victory over Conshohocken High.
The day of the game, which incidentally I remember weather-wise was beautiful for a Thanksgiving morning. Game was at 10 o'clock. The field was completely ringed with spectators. It was a good game, and the only touchdown was not scored until about the last 2 minutes, when we were fortunate enough to recover a fumble, and in 3 plays, fumble was at about the 3-yard line. Louis Devaney took it in for the winning touchdown.
Conshohocken High School, like St. Matthew's, organized football in the early 20s. Students began playing in 1921, and in 1922, football was added to the athletic program. Seth Mitchell, a former Brown University football captain, and Blubber Jones coached the first squad. In 1923, the school joined the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association. and the phys ed teacher, Art Gurman, was appointed as coach to comply with new rules. The team was named the Golden Bears in 1926. On September 30th, 1930, the Conshohocken Recorder proclaimed, "Conshohocken High School defeats Norristown High 7-6. Students parade in celebration of victory." This was the first win over Norristown, and it was the initial victory in the first of 2 undefeated seasons. The captain of the team was Vince Bounce Bunkowski. He later coached Conchi High's second undefeated team in 1951.
Now, the mid-20s marked a transition for professional football here in Conshohocken. As a matter of fact, quarterback Billy Parnell inherited Crawford's pro team in 1923, about the same time that high school teams and many local club teams were being formed. As a result, these new teams robbed the pros of their crowds. And in 1928, the early phase of pro football ceased in the borough.
The local club teams of the 1920s were a diverse lot. There was the Sherwood team, managed by Harry Sneer, the Pioneer Athletic Club of Conshohocken team, St. Mary's team, the Cosmians of St. Cosmas and Damien Church, George Smith's All-Stars, Joe Witt's Tigers, the Des Moines Pool Room team, the Young Men's Athletic Association team, the Conshohocken Reliance Club team, and others like this one, which featured the Irwin brothers and Charles Kriebel. In addition to these teams, the Conshohocken Recorder reported on what was called the Midget League. These were teams of neighborhood boys with names like the 6th Avenue Musketeers, the East Enders, the 3rd Avenue Bulldogs, and the Notre Dame Midgets. These boys played get-together football on vacant lots and the A-field. These teams came and went quickly. They vanished when members got older, married, or injured.
The story of football in Conshohocken wouldn't be complete without mentioning football legend John McBride. McBride grew up on 10th Avenue and later married Dorothy Davis of Fayette Street. He also earned national attention for Conshohocken with his record-breaking efforts at Syracuse University and his Most Valuable Player Award from the National Football League in 1927.
John McBride, also known as Jack and Johnny McBride, went All-American at Syracuse University in 1924. He set school and national records with his running, passing, and drop-kicking abilities. In 1925, he was the starting fullback for the New York Giants and played alongside of the great Jim Thorpe. In 1927, McBride was selected the NFL's most valuable player over Harold Red Grange, the Babe Ruth of professional football. McBride played for more than a decade with the Giants before retiring.
Despite the prominence that John McBride brought to Conshohocken, he never played organized football here. As a matter of fact, he left Conchi High in 1918 before they even had a team. But it's said that McBride played plenty of sandlot football right here at the corner of 2nd and Forest Streets. Now, by 1930, well, the country was beginning to suffer the effects of the Great Depression. Here in Conshohocken, there were cutbacks in manufacturing and people tightened their belts. But on the whole, well, the borough escaped the brunt of the economic peril. Football at St. Matthew's High School was really the only significant casualty of the Depression. Its program was suspended until 1944.
The Depression did not stop new football teams from forming. The Conshohocken Pros, seen playing at Shibe Park in Philadelphia, sparked great interest as the 30s came to a close. Players like Whitey Meller, Jesse Zadroga, and Dan O'Donnell brought exciting pro ball back to Conshohocken.
They were all good athletes. Some of the local athletes that played, Danny O'Donnell, now he was a St. Matthew's boy. He was on the team. Newt Lawler was also a Conshohocken High School boy. This is the year that I took the 40 team over. And there was Whitey Miller, which I'll get back to him, and Tony Traveline, who was a tackle who sort of was part of management also, who was a great guy as far as, you know, keeping the success of the ball club going. And Whitey Miller, who was a great back and a good three-sport athlete in high school. And I guess one of the best backs came out of this area.
The Conshohocken Pros won 3 Eastern Pennsylvania Football Conference championships in their 6-year existence. The team dissolved in 1941 when key players went to war. World War II forced the borough's attention away from football. On a sunny January day in 1941, factories, offices, and schools closed as hundreds of onlookers jammed Fayette Street to see off Battery C of the 1st Howitzer Battalion of the 166th Artillery. Battery C followed the Conshohocken High School Marching Band, led by Drum Majorette Betty Colburn. From their barracks on Maple Street, they marched down Fayette through the masses of people to the train station at the Matson Ford Bridge. After a jubilant farewell, Battery C went to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. For 5 years, the unit fought battles in North Africa, Italy, France, Germany, and Austria. Many of its members never returned.
Now, in World War II, 1 out of 8 residents of Conshohocken directly served in the military. But despite this tremendous sacrifice, St. Matthew's High managed to renew their football program in 1944. As a matter of fact, that fall, the Thanksgiving game between St. Matthew's and Conshohocken High was resurrected. The game offering a welcome diversion for war-weary locals and was the beginning of a cherished rivalry.
When I was a youngster in the 50s, there would be crowds in these stands. Country High would play on Friday nights, and then of course St. Matt's would play on Saturdays in the Catholic League. And the stands would be packed, there'd be 2 or 3 deep around the field. On Thanksgiving, you used to have to crawl between people's legs to get in the end zone so you could sit in the end zone and watch the game.
Well, I don't think we'll ever have the excitement and the involvement that we had when we had Country High and St. Matthew's going head-to-head.
Oh, they had signs in shops, and the kids would have bonfires, and you weren't supposed to know about that. The police weren't supposed to know about that. But this was part of, like it is now in school, and they build up all the interest in it. But that game was the game that everybody pointed for. The team that might have had the worst record that year could have beaten the other team. It was a good rivalry and a real good one. And they used to kid, well, Charlie Evie and Harry Fox don't get along together. That was a crock too, because Charlie used to come down and visit our house prior, and this is news to a lot of you people that are looking at this right now. Come down and we'd visit with one another 2 or 3 days before the game, and other things that people don't know. We would drop a playbook in town, and one of the kids would find it. That would steam them up. Then we'd do the same thing, or they'd do the same thing. And they say, oh, we got all our plays. We know what they're going to do on Thanksgiving. We got this and we got that. And then they'd have the game, and that would, it was great.
Well, the band was very special. And on Thanksgiving Day, you'd have the 2 bands marching up Fayette Street into the A-field. It was just a beautiful, beautiful time.
The jackets were more of a royal blue
with a white skirt and a royal blue kick pleat.
And we wore drum majorette boots, and the skirts were about an inch above the top of the boots.
They were very modest.
Yes.
That was the word.
Very
we wore
modest.
bellboy hats with blue plumes. And we wore white belts.
White belts.
That were very a military style belt.
Yes.
That's what was, I think, so exciting was that you were a part of something that was important to the whole town. It was the event of the whole, that whole fall season. It was the culmination of the entire, from September until November.
That was it.
Yeah.
And the final game was always between Conshohocken and St. Matthew's, which were rivals for ever and ever.
You really wanted your team to win, but and that was very, very important. I can't. It's almost like hard to believe that was so important now, but it was like the most important thing. They absolutely had to win. There was no, there wasn't a question. They were going to win. I mean, whether they had lost a lot of games through this season, that they were always going to be up for that game.
Oh, it was great for this town. This town was enthused when you had 2 schools playing each other. Once that whistle blows and that ball's kicked, you don't know who's there, and you could care less. Concentrate on the game. Concentrate on winning. Concentrate on beating St. Matt's. That's it.
The 4 or 5 days leading up to the games, I've never said so many rosaries in class. I mean, the nuns, you'd be praying, you'd be doing this. And if you lost the game, you figure, my God, Lord, what you do to us? We got to go another year with this.
The Thanksgiving games pitted the parochial school against the public school and neighbor against neighbor. Winning meant everything. It was a classic American event. For the players, it was the season's final varsity game. Their families, friends, and girlfriends filled the stands. And for 20 years, this tradition continued. In the end, though, St. Matt's held an 11-6 edge with 3 ties. Now, although Conshohocken High was the underdog in the Thanksgiving rivalry, the school's football program had some glorious times.
Conchi High's 1951 team achieved greatness when it went undefeated and untied. The team played under the tutelage of Coach Vince Bounce Bonkowski. The amazing thing about this was that back in 1930, Bonkowski had been team captain during the only other season that a Conchi High team went undefeated. In June of 1966, after 45 seasons of football and 53 years of existence, Conshohocken High held its last commencement exercise. The school's enrollment had fallen below state requirements, so its doors were ordered closed. The remaining students and football players transferred out of the borough to Plymouth White Marsh High School. In 1956, the students and faculty of St. Matt's moved to a new school building at 13th and Fayette Street. 10 years later, the school was officially renamed Archbishop Kennedy. The new school carried on the football tradition of old St. Matt's. The football years most remembered at Kennedy were those played under head coach Chris Bockrath. Under his guidance, the Saints won 8 Bicentennial League championships. He coached the team through the school's only undefeated seasons in 1981 and 1983.
Like Conchi High, enrollments at Archbishop Kennedy steadily dropped. And in 1993, well, the school merged with Bishop Kenrick of Norristown. The closing of Kennedy marked the end of high school football here in the borough. Now, no community devoted to football would be complete without a youth league. As a matter of fact, the Conshohocken Midgets have enjoyed excellent community support since 1961.
The Conshohocken Midgets started with 52 boys playing and 22 girls cheering. They originally had 2 teams playing in the Pop Warner League. One was the Midgets, who weighed in at 110 pounds, and the other was the Pee-wees at 90 pounds. In 1962, the Midgets played their first Irontown Bowl at the A Field. There, they beat the Dedham Dynamos from Massachusetts. 5 years later, the teams joined the Keystone State League. By then, participation had grown to 175 boys, divided into 6 weight classes. In 1972, the 115-pound team was undefeated and went on to win the annual Burt Bell Bowl, which was played inside the Atlantic City Convention Hall. The 1980s were plagued with misdirection and disappointing seasons. Despite these misfortunes, a core of parents managed to hold the organization together. Today, the organization is rejuvenated. More than 200 Conshohocken youth form 7 teams with cheerleading squads supporting each team. New facilities for equipment storage and concessions are being built at the B Field. Over the years, hundreds of dedicated parents have contributed to making this program successful. It's no wonder that the teams from Conshohocken have achieved more victories than any other organization in the Keystone State League.
Now, parallel with the Midgets, there was renewed interest in semi-pro football. You see, the Conshohocken Pros had collapsed in 1942 because many of their players went off to war. And for over 20 years, well, semi-pro football was simply dead. Then, in the mid-60s and early 70s, Conshohocken fielded not 1, not 2, but 3 teams. These were the Conshohocken Athletic Association, the Ironmen, and the Steelers. Interest in the AA and the Ironmen quickly faded. The Steelers have been more resilient. They organized for 2 seasons in 1966, 2 seasons in 1971, and since 1991, well, they've played 4 seasons.
The Steelers of the 60s and 70s were losing teams. They lost their fans and died. The reorganized team for the 90s has posted winning seasons. Game attendance is high, and the organization's finances are sound. According to Bernie Murray, the general manager, the team is filled with quality players. The majority of the players are from Conshohocken.
The Conshohocken Steelers of 1994 were starting early, and we got the proper attitude. As long as we get the ball players, it's hard to get team 180 and under, but we're trying, and I think we'll do good this year. And we can't wait to get Norristown, North Penn, that's Ambler. Yeah, that's good competition.
Now, earlier I mentioned that Bob Crawford originally had this playing field developed for football, but folks, that was back in 1914. Since then, this field has been at the very heart of Conshohocken football. But the field wasn't always like this.
After the field was cleared, Crawford had a stockade fence erected around it. In 1921, a covered grandstand was added to protect fans from the elements. In 1925, it was referred to as the Conshohocken Community Center Field. In the mid-40s, Albert A. Garthwaite, president of the Lee Tire and Rubber Company, donated thousands of dollars to renovate the stands and construct the entryway and locker rooms. The new field was called the Conshohocken Community Field. In 1975, the deed for the land was officially donated to the borough of Conshohocken by the Lee Tire and Rubber Company. After Garthwaite died in 1967, the borough of Conshohocken renamed the field the Albert A. Garthwaite Field. Since then, the field has been known as the A Field.
100 years is certainly a long time, and for football in this borough, well, it's been an especially rich and proud time. Whether you mark the years as a player, a fan, a cheerleader, or a parent, the excitement of football has left indelible impressions in all of our minds. Many of the old players may now be forgotten, but the tradition of football in Conshohocken lives on. On behalf of the Conshohocken Historical Society, I'm Phil Andrews.